More than half of high-growth companies struggle with the sales development process. If you want your sales team to have more at-bats with decision-makers at target accounts, talk to Inside Sales Team, the sales development team experts at InsideSalesTeam.com.
Hello, everybody. This is David Delaney back at you with another edition of the Sales Development Podcast. I am so happy to introduce you to a gentleman who we've been trying to get on the show for a while. He's got a great story to tell. Mr. Jeremy Leveille with Navisite. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing excellent, David. Thanks for having me on. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great, man. Just running around crazy and as usual, and
the
just
hair on fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm doing excellent, and still adjusting to a new role here at Navisite. It's been, I think, just under 2 months or so since I moved out of a sales dev, biz dev position, and just learning more and more every day, and loving it.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk with you. Like I said, a lot of the folks who listen to the show are in sales development. They might have just become managers recently or have been around for a while. But everyone's always curious about how you go from, becoming a sales development rep to maybe an account executive, a channel manager, or even a manager for the team. So I really wanted to talk about your story, how you kind of crawled up through the ranks of the company and got into the position now going from, your SDR, BDR to a channel manager.
Yeah, absolutely. So before I got to Navisite, I was in a sales dev, biz dev role for about 2.5 years for a company called the Chameleon Group in the Seacoast area of New Hampshire. So I was able to really kind of cut my teeth there and get the hang of technology, the space, and cold calling, and got used to rejection and immune to rejection there, and was able to build rapport with people. Actually got let go from 4 different sales jobs. So before I went to Chameleon Group, I was like, okay, I don't even want to be in sales. So I've had to really persevere. And, perseverance, I think, is, one of the biggest reasons why, I've been successful now after, getting out of college in 2008 when, the economy was obviously at a pretty low point. Not that that's an excuse. I think it was the combination of that with the fact that when I was 22, just getting out of college, I was not nearly as good at sales as I am now. So, growing up and over time, just getting better at sales and interacting with people, dealing with people, getting more hungry and more motivated with my career is what enabled me to get better at sales over time and better, building rapport with and talking to people. So 2.5 years at Chameleon Group. So by the time I got here to Navisite, I already had a really solid foundational skill set of, sales development and business development. I just had to really just keep honing those skills and actually figure out what Navisite did. Because when I got here, I didn't even know what the cloud was. So, I've been here for about 15 months now, and now I like to think that I know quite a bit about it. But when I got here, I knew nothing about what the cloud was. So you just have to really dive in and try not to learn all of the technology all at one time. Don't just overwhelm yourself and think you have to know everything about your technology and all your competitors and everything, your value prop and everything the first day on the phone. It's a combination of learning a lot as much as you can within over time that first couple weeks, so you can get on the phone and at least start having halfway decent conversations. And from there, just getting better and learning more a little bit each day, as opposed to trying to overwhelm yourself with too much. But I was a BDR at Navisite for about 13 months. And then a position opened up within our channel organization on the channel sales team, because it was, around the same time I was like, okay, I've hit my quota as a BDR for about 10 months now in a row. One of those months, last October, I hit it 246% to quota. So our goal is 15 meetings held, not just set, but they actually have to be held, 15 meetings held within a given month. And that month I had 37, and 21 of them converted to opportunities within that same fiscal month. So that's when I was like, okay, I'm pretty good at this. Start looking around. Where is there a way I can move up within the company? And a role opened up within the channel organization, and I jumped at it, and it's been great to make that transition.
That's awesome, man. And so there's a lot there. Like, just a walk down memory lane. Like, what can you go into a little bit more about when you went into sales and it was like it sounds like you were having a hard time finding your groove at the beginning, and
Yep.
then tell us more about what changed. How did you get that groove and then eventually become so successful that you're getting, all these different opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. So I thought about it a lot, actually, and there's 3 different things that happened that made me go from somebody who sucked at sales to somebody who's really good at it. One of my first technology sales jobs was at PC Connection, or the now called Connection, one of the largest bars, technology resellers in the world, and only lasted 10 months there. It was my first technology sales job out of college. But a funny thing happened towards my end of my tenure there. In a meeting with one of the sales managers, it kind of came up that just randomly came up in the meeting that I was part of a sketch comedy group in college. And they were like, and my manager was just dumbfounded. He was like, really? But you don't sound like you have any personality or sense of humor when I hear you on calls. Because I was at that point where I wasn't being myself on the phone. I was just like, I was nervous, and I was young, I wasn't mature enough, didn't have the confidence, and was still trying to find myself and my personality on the phone. So I was just kind of sticking to the script and wasn't really being myself on the phone. I really let my personality out. So I think that was one thing that I learned, was you just got to really be yourself and let your personality out. And what enabled me to actually do that was I had another job. It wasn't a sales job. It was a customer service job. But one of the best customer service rep that we had there was at Cole Haan, actually. Many people probably know the shoe company. And the best customer service rep that they had, this guy was just unbelievable at building rapport. And he really let his personality out on the phone. And all of my skills with regards to building rapport came from this guy. His name was Matt Kirsch. And I learned so much about building rapport and being yourself on the phone and letting your personality out. So that was a really big key for me. And then also, the more I got to know people and just interacted with people out in social situations, out in the real world, because I was living in a vibrant city, Portsmouth, New Hampshire, in the New Hampshire Seacoast, with lots of young people, and I was making a lot of new friends out in the city. And I'd interact with people at the supermarket. I'd interact with people, at restaurants, and anywhere I went, just interacting with strangers. And in a sales development role, so important is to get comfortable talking to strangers, get good at talking to strangers, and then carrying that comfort level over to when you're on the phone. Because, in sales development, you're on the phone with these prospects. They're strangers. You're cold calling and cold emailing them. They're strangers. And, most people aren't good at talking to strangers. Some people are pretty good at talking to their friends, but you try to talk to a stranger on the phone, make a cold call, and they just sound awkward, and they sound unsure of themselves. So I would just talk to strangers anywhere I went. I'd go to bars and talk to strangers, the post office, anywhere, because I was in this vibrant city where people just interacted and mingled with each other. And so I got really, really good at talking to people face to face in person, and comfortable talking to people, and carried that over to on the phone. And that's when I started to really get good at it. The third thing is, at Community Group, I had a really good sales development, business development manager named Tom Stewart, who helped me out a lot. He, at one point, I was having good conversations with people, but I wasn't getting enough meetings. So he recorded the calls. He said, Jeremy, I want you to take 3 or 4 calls where you had a conversation with a prospect, but you weren't quite able to get closed on a meeting with them. And I was able to we had all our calls recorded, so I emailed them 3 or 4 recordings. We went in the conference room. He, just like a football coach, doing X's and O's, doing right, putting up plays and coaching his team. He would play the recording, stop it at certain points, and give you pointers. See what you said there. What I would have said is maybe said this. And, it was only about a 25-minute meeting, but we just replayed those 4 calls, and he gave advice. We had some back and forth about what went well, what didn't go well, how I could drill down better on the pain when they were actually showing pain or showing buying signals, and also what questions to ask, how to really open up the conversation and actually get it from, okay, here's a little bit of a window that prospect is giving me when they say that. Here's how to take it from that to actually closing on a meeting, and closing with confidence, as opposed to being like, oh, well, we can maybe have a call next Tuesday to talk about this if you think that would be okay. Getting away from that and closing more with confidence. So that was a really, I'd say that meeting with that manager is, that 25-minute meeting was huge. Probably did more for me listening to those calls and getting coached on them than anything else to really get good at sales development. So those are kind of in a nutshell, really helping me to get where I am now.
No, I love that. I mean, I think the main, a few points there. One is that you took your self-development into your own hands and really focused on getting outside of your comfort zone to become better, and learn from the, difficult situations that you're having. So a lot of people, I think, they easily can kind of give up and then just go into your shell, watch some Game of Thrones, eat some pizza, go hang out with your buddies. But if you have passion towards self-development, it's kind of like the sky's the limit, because instead of taking those criticisms and getting more negative, you actually make it a positive. And then a few other things is, you when you're growing up, your parents are always like, don't talk to strangers, stay away from, don't do that, don't do this. Like, you get kind of conditioned to not, want to go out and talk to random people. Mm-hmm. And, it makes you more and more awkward on the phone. And you, instead of just letting that become more and more of a negative spiral, you actually went out and tried to do the opposite of that, which is great advice. And then the last quick thing was the seeking mentorship from folks and asking for help. I think a lot of people, after they start to get beat down a little bit, they kind of go into their shell a little bit, and they are maybe intimidated by people with more experience. And I would say that that's a huge mistake for especially SDRs, but even managers and directors and everybody, to just think like, I'm just not going to ask for help, because that's a little bit intimidating, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it goes both ways. I mean, it's on that SDR, but it's also on the leadership. The SDR has to have it within them to be like, okay, I just had 2 months when I didn't hit my number. What, and it should be within them to go to their manager and be like, hey, what do you think? What am I saying that's not resonating? Why don't I send you a couple of call recordings? We can kind of work through it. So on one hand, it's on that SDR to get better on their own, and maybe it means them listening to some podcasts or going to an event, reaching out to somebody else that they can maybe bounce some ideas off to try to get better. Read some blogs, read a book, try to better themselves. But I think it's also on the SDR leadership to really be proactive about, okay, I have this SDR who is kind of struggling. They haven't hit their number in the last couple of months. What can I do? Let's look at the metrics. Let's look at, if it's their dials, then they need to make more dials. But if they're making a lot of dials, but having very short conversations, like if their conversations are under a minute per dial, well, what are they saying, in those conversations? And, so it's on the leadership to take it upon themselves to coach the SDRs to get them where they need to be. So I think, it definitely works both ways. But, as an SDR, you can't just wait for the leadership to coach you and get you better. You need to take it upon yourself and do it and do the work. And a lot of the work that I've done since I've been at Navisite to really take me to the next level, to move from BDR to channel sales manager, has been doing additional things, extra work, putting in the work outside of, just 8 to 5, 9 to 5 hours. Some of the days I've been here until 8 o'clock, 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. I think one time I was even here till 9:30. What was I doing? You might ask, because obviously I'm not calling people that late at night. Well, sometimes I would, because what I would do, if there was an account that I really wanted to get into, I would identify 3 to 5 people at that account that I really wanted, that I identified were the right people for me to talk to. And knowing that they're not going to answer their phone, I would just leave them a voicemail. I'd call their direct line, knowing that I'm going to get a voicemail, leave them a voicemail, and I would send them an email. And anytime I call anybody, I'm on their LinkedIn profile. So they're getting a notification that I viewed their profile. If there's any content that they may have posted, that I might like or comment on their content, they're getting a voicemail from me, and they're seeing an email. So, and I'm doing that for like 3 to 5 different people from that same company. And I might do that for like 5 different companies. So I'll end up being there until like 8 or 9 o'clock at night. So part of it, putting in that extra work. Also, I'm reading books or going to a sales networking events, watching podcasts. I think the single biggest reason why I got really good at specifically in a technology sales role, and in order to hit my number and get a promotion, CXO talk. Anybody who is a sales development rep or business development rep, if you're in sales at all, in the technology, selling to technology leaders, CIOs, IT managers, you need to be watching CXO talk, a podcast, in addition to your podcast, of course, David. But from a technology perspective, it's really valuable. They have some really good content, interviews with really high level executive IT thought leaders and CIOs. And you're able to get in the head of these CIOs, find out what their challenges are, what's important to them, what their world is like. And from watching these podcasts, be able to speak their language, so that in your messaging on the phone or in emails, you're more likely to resonate with them. So, those are all things that help me as well.
Yeah, dude, there's so much there. I mean, one of the first things that you went into was how it's also on the leadership. So this is everybody, in a leadership position who's listening, it's on you also to go out, make the time, schedule, do those coaching sessions, the X's and O's with the people on a regular basis, make that a big part of your schedule. I think, executives tend to get really sucked in to the internal, politics and trying to get reports and dashboards and all that stuff ready for their boss. And they kind of lose track of the whole coaching aspect that's so critical. And, maybe the SDRs don't know to ask for help from mentors and coaches. And then the mentors and coaches are too busy doing other stuff with the company, and nobody's really digging into some of those, I call them like choke points. There's, if you unpack where you're struggling there and put it on like a diagram, there's always going to be choke points. Maybe it's the conversations aren't converting to appointments. The appointments aren't converting to pipe, right? You got to be able to identify those. And you're right, it's on the leadership. And one other quick thought on that is that a lot of companies, they don't even have an SDR manager, or they've got groups of SDRs in remote offices who are supposedly reporting to either account executives or the remote VP in that office. But there's not a lot of direct management happening, and they just end up flailing. I don't think that works a lot of the times. I think you got to have the group of SDRs hopefully under one roof, to get that coaching going. The other couple of things I wanted to mention is, you determined and you understood that there's 8 to 5 or whatever, or 9 to 5 is just like the table stakes to be able to collect your paycheck and be there. But where you really excelled was understanding that there's also a lot of other time that's available to excel and to get ahead. And, you're on LinkedIn and you're making lists, you're hitting people up, you're listening to the podcasts and stuff like that, going to networking events. I mean, that's how you got to do it, man. I mean, it's not like just hanging up your hat at 5 o'clock and you're like, I'm completely done. I mean, if you don't have enough passion to like keep grinding, then you might not be in the right position, or you might be not selling the right products, right?
Yeah, you have to be passionate about it. I mean, that's You said it right there. I was about to just say, yeah, well, it's about being passionate about what you're doing. And, I think a lot of people in sales, they just kind of are in it because they don't know what else to do, because obviously it's not something that you go to college for. Most people, just stumble into sales, but at the same time, there's more sales jobs like that in the world than compared to any other type of job, so I think there's a lot more sales jobs than there is people who actually want to do sales. So, you got to just find something you're passionate about. And if you're not, then, do something else. Maybe you are good at sales. You just have to go to a different company, but you just have to be passionate about it and, really give it your all and put your all into it in order to be successful.
Inside Sales Team fully integrates with clients. CEO of Discover Org, Henry Schuck, partnered with us, and we've generated over $25 million in new business revenue.
They are firing on every best practice for running a sales development team.
Learn more at InsideSalesTeam.com.
Yeah, man. I mean, you got to be passionate about yourself. I mean, like
and have self-confidence,
more and more.
self-belief.
Right. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, and you have self-confidence and self-belief. Yeah.
Right. I mean, and I was just going to say, more and more in our economy, everyone is almost like the CEO of yourself. It's you, Inc., man. I mean, there's nobody's going to be out there like looking out for you and trying to help you out. I mean, you've got to develop it. You got to work it yourself and be passionate about yourself. And I think honestly, like people, if you're looking at jobs and everybody needs a job, you need that paycheck. But if you're still in the position where you're doing interviews and stuff like that, you got to really think about, am I passionate about this product? Because you're going to be in there 40, 50, 60 hours a week, selling this and trying to get people excited about it. And it's like, if you just took the job because it's a cool logo and like they've got ping pong tables at the office, like, right? How are you going to get excited about that after a while?
Yeah, and at the same time, though, like you might not be as passionate about it right off the bat. Sometimes that might grow over time. Like you might just come into the job. Maybe you just took the job because there was the logo, or you just needed a job. You're coming out of college or whatever it might be. You may have fell into that job. But if you're an SDR and maybe you've been there for a month, maybe even 3 or 4 months, and you're just kind of going through the motions or whatever, maybe it's, like you said, David, you have to be passionate about that product and believe that it's actually helping people out in the marketplace. So one thing you can do is, talk to your product team, talk to your product team about, all right, what really is our value in the marketplace? Ask if you can get contact information for some of your customers, check out the case studies that you have on your successful customers. Talk to other people at the company. Talk to your manager about, okay, what really is our value here? Can I go to where one of our customers is and see how they actually use our product and experience the difference that it makes for them? Doing things like that. You might not have the passion for the product right off the bat, but doing things like that will get you there. And if you do all that, if you talk to your product team, you're checking out all these case studies, you're looking at video case studies and going to your customer site, seeing how they use it, and you still aren't passionate about it after like even 6 months, well, then maybe you do have to go find a different place to work. But hopefully you get there by experiencing some of that. And then it'll click and you'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, now I'm passionate about it and I really get it. It'll click and you'll be like, okay, yeah, this is who our ideal customer profile is. And this is their pain. This is how we solve that pain. This is why they need us. Okay. And now I'm going to incorporate, that into my messaging. I'm going to incorporate those case studies into my messaging. And then all of a sudden you'll start to see your sales numbers go up. It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, man. And that's another good point, because a lot of the folks, who listen to this, they might just be getting into the business and, they got the job at this company that sells, some kind of technology, for example, and the people that they're calling have 10, 20 years of experience in the role. And, like you've said a few times, what's really important and what makes you more successful is really getting inside the head of your prospects and trying to understand what their pain points are and how your product can help them. But the problem is that a lot of the folks they've never been in that position for 10 or 20 years, obviously. They've never, experienced those pain points. So I think it's really difficult for people to just suddenly be able to talk about those things and sound intelligent. And so that one point that you made is, hopefully you're starting to build some passion about what you're selling, and you're getting more and more into it, and you're reading case studies, you're watching videos, you're understanding things, you're listening to the CXO podcast, you're trying to get inside their head. And then as you create better messaging that appeals to them, your numbers start to go up and you get more positive about things. Is that sort of the virtuous cycle that you're talking about?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it comes to, like you mentioned there, David, really knowing your buyer and getting in the heads of their buyer, knowing what's important to them, and just really getting a firm grasp on, who your ideal customer is, and knowing, what their world is like. And that's why, depending on what you're selling, if you're selling to HR people, selling to HR leaders, then you should be reading blogs and listening to podcasts that HR leaders listen to and read. If you're selling to marketing people, you should be listening to podcasts and going to events and reading books and watching podcasts that those marketing people listen to, and watch and attend. So, for me in the technology, selling to CIOs and IT directors, I was able to learn so much from all these CXO Talk podcasts. And another thing is, I only even found out about CXO Talk from Jill Rowley. She commented on a blog post that I wrote on LinkedIn. So it just shows like the power of building your brand as an SDR or BDR, and, putting yourself out there, putting some well thought out content out there based on what you're experiencing in your role. Some of my articles that I've written on LinkedIn are related to sales and trials and tribulations and sales tips, how I've been able to get better, things that I've run up against. But a lot of it, as I've gotten more and more into my tenure at Navisite, because when I first started here, like I said, I didn't even know anything about the cloud. So why would I write articles about cloud and technology and data centers and stuff if I didn't even know anything about it? So it took me a few months before I started to write articles about that type of stuff. But putting yourself out there, networking with people, like Jill Rowley and some of the technology thought leaders, that are out there, people that are the hosts and guests on CXO Talk, I would connect with them. And, that's how I even found out about that podcast, so connecting with those people and, building your network, building your brand is also really important. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes time to build that network and build that brand. And, people will let you know about podcasts like that, and you'll listen to them and gain that knowledge. And now that I'm in the channel, I was like, oh, okay, I'm a channel manager now. So it's kind of, instead of talking to the CIO or IT director directly, I'm more talking to the reseller who is selling to that person. So what's important to them? And lo and behold, only about a week after I started in this new role, I found out about a really cool podcast called Channel Outlaws. And I've watched literally every second of every episode that they have aired, which is only 10 of them. They've only got 10 episodes. It's a company called Intellisys that airs this podcast. And it's pretty new. So, but I've watched it. They're like hour-long episodes, and I've listened to all of them. So, and just came across that from networking with people within the channel on LinkedIn, finding out, who some of our channel partners already are, saw what kind of stuff they were posting on LinkedIn, and I stumbled across that podcast. So it just shows, how you can find that content that can get you the knowledge that you need.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And again, it comes back to having that work ethic, because that takes time. It takes time and energy to build your brand, and finding those resources, listening to the podcast and stuff like that. You can't fit it in the normal 8 hours. So something else has to give. You got to push out, the Game of Thrones and, all the fun stuff sometimes to be able to put in that time, but it totally pays off, because you never know where that's going to end up. You saw the Jill Rowley post, and then you wrote your own posts, and then you found the podcast, and it just kind of, you connect the dots without really knowing how it's going to play out.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that you made me think of is, as you're trying to figure out, like, okay, I want to create some content that's relevant to what I'm doing and helpful to people, but what do I say? You're just like, I'm an SDR who just started this job, and I would just say the main thing about content is be transparent and authentic to yourself, and just be like, hey, I'm just an example in your case, and I'm not giving advice, but I'm just thinking out loud, like, hey, I'm new to understanding the channel. I'm new to understanding how it works and what it all means. And I'm just going to do a series of posts, for example, about the channel and what it means and how I'm new to it. And I'm learning stuff and how I plan to help people using Navisite. I mean, that's content right there. And I think that would resonate because it's authentic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And plus that way, people will get back to you, and you'll be able to network with them, and they'll message you and be like, oh yeah, I can relate because I was in your position, just 3 years ago, new to the channel, and, they might message you back, and then you get on a call with them, and you might, talk to them, for an hour or so. So, it all goes back to building your brand. And, the first piece of content I wrote about technology when, I was still kind of getting used to what the cloud was all about and what the value was and all that. I watched an episode of CXO Talk, and I wrote a blog post about that. So most of the content in that blog post wasn't my writing. I had a bunch of quotes that I pulled from the episode with the host of the show's permission, of course. Michael Krigsman's the host. I asked his permission. He gave me permission to use the quotes, and he has a script, of the episode. So I was able to pull some quotes, and the technology thought leaders and decision makers who were on the episode, I was able to connect with all of them and tag them in the post. So they all shared it and commented and tagged other technology decision makers and thought leaders in it. So, most of that post was just kind of, quoting what they had said. And I'm just kind of, in my blog post between the quotes, I'm just kind of summarizing what they're saying and leading to the next quote. So, that's another idea for people, if they're just starting out and they might not be a subject matter expert. You can, quote people who are subject matter experts, and then tag them in that post. So they'll start following you,
Exactly. And then it just builds from there. You never know how it's going to end up. But, again, I think that people, they get kind of caught up because they're like, well, what do I have to say about this? Like I'm selling to HR, professionals who have been in the business for 20 years and they've got all these problems and I don't really relate to them. And, I mean, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about. First, you got to get inside their head, understand what they're dealing with, like where their pain points are, what problems they're solving. And then when you're thinking about doing content, it's like, how can I help them in some way it's not in a non-self-serving way. Just how can I add pure value? And it doesn't, and to your point, it doesn't have to be you writing an 8,000 word blog post about all these pain points or whatever. It can just be, look, I gathered some key points of information that can be of help. I'm going to tag all the people that produce this and let them know that I'm putting this together. And I create a package that's really valuable for people. And everybody wins, and like you said, you get some pickup from the networks of the people that you tag, and it becomes, just a virtuous cycle. I think that's how I initially found out about you, because you wrote a great blog post about sales development, and I highlighted some of the stuff. I forwarded it to people, and then next thing you know, we were connected, and then got you on the podcast. It's a virtuous cycle.
Yeah, and another thing, like people can write about any SDR or BDR in a blog post. Just think about the conversations that you have with prospects, and think about the emails that you send to them. If all of a sudden you find yourself, if you're like, oh, in these conversations I'm having, they seem to be always having the same objection, and I'm having really good success when I say this back to them, or, then just there's a blog post right there, a blog post about, this is the objection. So this is what many IT directors, seem to think about the cloud. And then, this is what I said to them and ended up getting a meeting. You can just turn that into a blog post, or if you take the emails that you send, there's content in those emails, that you are sending to these people to try to get their attention, or, they might email you back with a question and then you respond back. If that leads to a meeting, I mean, and especially if you're emailing similar content, if the messaging is similar a lot of the times, and you're finding that email seems to be working pretty well, take that content. That could probably be a blog post, because if it's working really well, that messaging about, whatever that value prop or that challenges or problem is that prospect is having, there's probably, 80% of the list that you're calling maybe is having that same problem or challenge. You could just write a blog post, and then, you're building your brand, and then, people who are you're calling, if you're viewing their profile on LinkedIn when you call them, they're probably going to view you as well. They'll see that you wrote that post, or, then they're like, oh, okay, this person knows what he's talking about. I'll email him back, or I'll call him back, and it helps you build your brand. And also, just by writing that content, it builds your confidence in knowing, you all of a sudden feel like a subject matter expert. So when you're on the phone, because you've written those emails with that content and you also wrote a blog post about that, now you feel like, oh, okay, this particular part of our technology, I've got this down. So then if somebody asks about it on the phone 2 days later, you don't even have to think about it. You're like, oh, I wrote 5 emails about that the other day, and I wrote a blog post about that. Then when they ask about it on the phone call a couple days later, it'll just roll right off your tongue without even thinking about it, and you'll just feel more confident on the phone.
Totally. I mean, the best way to learn something is start teaching it. I mean, because the feedback that you get, and the conversations that you get into, and the people that you meet, it starts to snowball the learning. And so that's some great homework for people that are on the line. If you've been struggling to come up with, how do I build my brand, and how do I come up with content, look through your old emails, look through normal situations that you're in. If you've been in the job for 3 to 6 months, I mean, you know probably a lot more about sales development than somebody who's just coming up through the ranks behind you. So you can add value there. And the more that you get out to those industry events and networking events, and read the same, websites that your target prospects read, you're going to be able to pull that together into something valuable and post it and build it up from there. So, Jeremy, those are some great things, man. I mean, we're kind of running up against the hour. I want to know what's next for you. Tell us about what you're doing now and how you got into the channel side of things from sales development.
Yeah, sure. So it's funny, a position just opened up in the channel, and I was kind of looking around like, okay, what should I do from sales development? I'm hitting my number, and I was like, okay, it usually goes to an account executive, or maybe you go into marketing, or you might go into, customer success, account management, channel. So where do I want to go? There was an open position for an account executive, and I actually applied for it and didn't get it because they were looking for somebody who had more experience, some, like 5-10 years experience in a closing quota carrying role. Somebody who had, a lot more closing experience. But with the channel, it is a closing quota carrying role, but it's less selling and more enabling our partners to sell. So I was able to move into that role instead. And, as far as what's next, I've only been in the channel position here for, like 6 weeks and, 6 or 7 weeks. And I'm just looking to get better every day and just get to the point where I'm killing it and crushing it and hoping to, build Navisite up even more. I mean, we're a 20-year-old company, but there's a lot of people that don't know who we are. And so, I'm trying to just put Navisite on the map. I feel like since I've been here, a lot more people know about us than before. And, just trying to kill it and see what happens from there.
Nice, dude. Well, I'm sure that, with all the work that you've been doing and the great habits that you have and everything you've shared, you're going to continue to rise up through the ranks. So, Jeremy, this has been awesome. I'm excited to get this transcribed because I think that there's just tons of nuggets of wisdom in here. And we'll get it transcribed and put up on the daviddelaney.com blog after the show. Thank you so much for being on, and just really appreciate it, man.
All right. Thanks, David. I appreciate it. 2 books for people to check out: Sales Acceleration Formula by Mark Roberge and Fanatical Prospecting by Jeb Blount. 2 really good books that helped me out a lot. But thanks, Dave, and hope people get some value from this.
Yeah, you got it, man. Then those are awesome. We'll put links up there on the transcription if folks haven't read both of those. Mm-hmm. They're great books. So
definitely
the recommendation, Jeremy. Thanks so much.
All right, thanks, David.
Bye-bye.